of, just helping everybody with college planning. And I'm Kristin Clark. I'm here with Bobby Hood, and we've got an interesting topic today.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely excited about this. I mean, I know that like everybody just sits there waiting to know when to talk about college planning, and some people are like, let's start talking about it in 7th grade, and then other people are like surprised by it when it comes up. But the question is just like, when do you and how do you start, right?
It's that. And I think what I find interesting is parents, when we get into this process, we've been so used to controlling the conversations and helping our kids solve problems that this is kind of that transition time where you need to start being the counselor or the consultant and not the manager of your kids, right? And it's kind of a weird time frame because you're toggling back and forth between the two. But I really feel like it's on the parents to start kind of backing off and letting their kids make some decisions, because let's face it, in 1 year, 2 years, they're going to be off making decisions and you're not going to be around.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, like parents are always, and probably from birth, thinking about, where their kid might go to college or whether they're going to go to college or what kind of career they might be in. But you as a parent might be interested in that at 10th grade or whatever, but your student may not be ready to talk about it at that point, if that makes sense, right? They are so focused on all their activities and things in high school, and you can try and take them on college visits and stuff, but they may not be interested in talking about it yet, right? But at some point they're going to suddenly become interested. And at least in my role with standardized tests and the SAT and ACT, students don't care about it and just tell their parents, oh, I don't want to think about that. And then suddenly it becomes cool to do well on a standardized test because that can get you into college. And that happens maybe junior year when PSAT scores come back or something, but suddenly some students start talking about where they want to go to college. And then your student, your son, your daughter is going to come up and say, hey, I'm thinking about, like out of the blue, right? I'm thinking about this or that, right?
Yes. And I'll tell you, Bobby, that moment is key, right? Where you have to really think about how you're going to act and react. And, when I say that, I've seen so many times that a student will bring up an idea. And as a parent, our first reaction is, really? You've never said that before. Wow. Why are you interested in that now? Or, okay, and that even the facial expressions I made, I think really come true, because they may throw us for a loop. They may be talking about stuff they've never talked about. But that very first reaction from parents, I think, is key.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think all of us, I think even every person remembers a time when they said to their parents, oh, I'm interested in this career or that career. And they're like, oh, why would you want to do that? That's a terrible thing, right? I mean, kind of a funny story. I remembered this the other day. One time when I was working as an attorney, one of my colleagues from an investment firm was a woman named Mary Popper. And we were just talking during the work call, 7 or 8 people on the call. And somebody asked, hey, that last name Popper sounds, interesting. Would you by any chance be related to John Popper of Blues Traveler? And she said, oh yeah, that's my son. And this is when they were at their height in the early 2000s. And they said, well, what's the, thing with that? And she said, well, I told my kids they could be anything they wanted to be. And he said he wanted to be a musician. And I said, great, go be a musician. And now he's that, and you think about how most parents, if your child said, hey, I want to be a musician, the initial reaction would be like, hey, very few people make it and that's a terrible life and blah, blah, blah. Right. But instead you could be like, well, you could be a music professor. You could, there are so many things you could do. You could make music. You could be a music producer. There are all these things. Just liking music, right? There's no reason to say no to that. But I think it would be so much of all of our immediate response,
It is. And I can tell you, with my work with kids, helping them to figure out a career path and a college major, they're going to talk themselves out of anything that doesn't make sense.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to tell them it makes sense. They'll figure it out. And so encourage them like, okay, so think about how that's going to work and whatever. And then they'll be like, oh, well, maybe I'd rather, be a music producer or something. Right. But, like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So, I always have a phrase that I tell parents, and I'll share that in a minute. But one of the other things that I think it's really important to talk about when we're talking about college planning, and your son or daughter comes up to you and they say, hey, it's kind of time for me to take the SAT, let's think about that. After that, like they pop that cork, right? It's like, oh, now all of a sudden, all we ever want to talk about is college planning at home, because that's on our minds. We know that we've got deadlines. We know there are things to do. Yeah. One of the nice things that you can do at home for your student is just pick one day a week, whether that be Sunday dinner, sometime that you guys know that you're always together. Maybe it's driving home from football practice or baseball practice on a Friday or a whatever day. Pick one time, and that's when you talk about college planning. And you just say, okay, what do we need to do this week?
What a great idea. I mean, just like, as opposed to like letting things slide, then it becomes an emergency and then everybody's mad at each other, right? Just say, okay, let's pick out one thing this week and do it, right? And if that's so much like what I tell students a lot of the times, like if a project seems really large and seems like you're not going to be able to do it, right? It just seems daunting because it's so large. Just pick a piece and do one piece, right? And think of things as a checklist. Okay, there are 40 things. I can go do this one thing. Because if you think, oh, I have to do all the things, then you start thinking about all the steps and it gets to be too much. But just say, yeah, this week, what can we do this week? And even if it's just research 5 colleges and, or go find a list of names of colleges or, anything, right? Just a way to get the process started. Because once you get the kid interested, that's when everything changes. Does. Right.
And you hit a really good part of this, Bobby, and that is, yes, let's take this elephant and eat it one bite at a time. But the other piece of it is this. For parents, don't bring it up again throughout the week.
Right. And that becomes exhausting and stressful.
Yeah, hear me out on this, because that kid is going to get college fatigued, where it's like, oh my gosh, just quit talking about it, right? And all of a sudden they start clamming up and they don't want to talk at all. So if they come to you and they say, hey, I looked up those, a bunch of different colleges, answer these questions, full on, have the conversation. They're driving that part.
Right. But you should only make it a predetermined time to remind yourself to only do it once a week, because otherwise you're just going to do it whenever it occurs to you. And also you're going to be feeling guilty that you didn't bring it up before. And then you're going to have this, that negative thing behind it, right? Which is just like, oh, hey, so let's talk. We do this regularly, like once a week. Let's just say, so what can we do this week? Not, oh, you haven't done anything. You're, being lazy, or something.
Right. Like and it goes from having a constructive conversation versus nagging and constantly picking at your kid and going, what have you done? What have you done? What have you done? It's like, you know what? They're getting ready to be adults. So trust that they're going to get it done that week. If they don't, then handle it at that weekly meeting and you move on. Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people just forget about all this because they kind of assume that like the school's college counselor or something, guidance counselor is going to take care of this. And they'll do a couple of things. Right. But you have to start this process at home. Like you can't just assume that this is all going to happen. Right. They might help with essays, recommendations or something, but they're not going to sit you down and say, okay, here's the checklist and do this week and do this next week. You've got to start all that. And you should start it spring of junior year at the latest, I think, right? At least having those weekly conversations, you should start them throughout junior year or at least spring of junior year, right?
Yes. And then, so let me share the phrase that I share with
you. So I'm just so worried about ruining a kid's attitude completely about like an entire career. And so, I'm really interested in what a parent can say that can, guard against this.
Yes. And of course, when I'm doing it, it is around career, right? And because it's such a big topic in a family, but you can use this for anything having to do with college planning. And the phrase is, that's really interesting. Tell me more.
Okay. Oh, man. It's so simple, but my gosh, yeah, like that's the most important. I don't think, honestly, people say that to students very often, you know.
Yeah.
Students are often told, you don't know anything, we know everything, you have to do what we say, here are your, you know, go do your chores, blah, blah, blah. But not just, hey, tell me more about that interest of yours. Tell me
Yep.
more about why are you interested in that? Instead of, oh, you know, I had a friend who did that job and they were so unhappy, right? Because that'll ruin everything, you
It
know.
will ruin everything. And then you're talking mother-in-law research of one. You know, the
And
fact that somebody else wasn't interested in it doesn't mean that your kiddo's not interested in it. And I think it also opens you up, Bobby, to when they are telling you more,
mm,
to probe and ask questions, and not the, well, have you thought of, more of,
right.
oh, okay, yeah, is there a way I can support you in this? How
Mhm.
can I help you get more information on this subject? Who,
Right. Not
who do
support
I
you on
know?
making you do it, but support you on getting more information and letting them figure it out for themselves, whether it does make sense or not. Because of course, yeah, like the first idea that occurs to us, like there are so many directions that could lead you into paths that make more sense, right?
Absolutely. And you know, that's what I love digging into. It's,
Yeah.
oh, wow, you know, you're interested in music. That doesn't mean you have to be a singer. It doesn't mean that you know, have to be in front of on a stage. It could mean that you're behind
Mhm.
the stage and you're helping because you love that atmosphere. So there's so many different ways that you can take this,
Mhm.
that, you know, let them talk and express why they were interested in it, because it may lead down the path to, yeah, I started with music, but now the more we talk, I'm really more interested in teaching or producing, or, you know, whatever that path may take you. So yeah, I mean, it just opens it up to having the conversations.
Yeah, and I think really like I think it's even more important. Like I think so much stems from this because so many parents and families have just big battles about college planning, and the students don't want to do it, and nobody's enthusiastic about anything, and it's this horrible drudge. And it a lot of times might literally stem from that first sentence where the student said, the son or daughter said, hey, I'm interested in this, and then the immediate reaction was like, well, why would you want to do that, that's dumb, or whatever.
Mhm.
Well, of course, they're never going to be enthusiastic about all this stuff. But if you go the other direction, you're like, yeah, this is about what you want to do. Let's explore it. How can I help you explore it? You might find the entire process from start to finish becomes a lot easier and less combative and more enjoyable. You know, it's, you know,
And it
it's
could go the
just
other
so,
direction. It could go the other direction where all of a sudden they dig their heels in and they're like, oh, let me show you why I want to do it. Right. And
oh,
all of a sudden
wow. Right.
they just get stuck on a path that maybe isn't the right path for them, but they're doing it because you said no, or you made a funny face.
Oh my gosh. Right. So they brought up something that you probably as a parent, and that's part of the reason why you might have this negative response immediately, is like because you do know a lot about your kid and you're like, oh, this would be a bad path for you. That may be correct, but by saying don't do that, that's a dumb idea, now, yeah, they're not even going to investigate it, they're just going to go do it without having figured out that it doesn't make sense on their own, which you could have helped them figure out if you supported them and helped them investigate it.
Oh yeah.
uh,
And that was
wow.
me. I will tell you, that was me as a kid. If my mom said the sky is blue, I was like, really? I think it's pink. You
Oh,
know?
absolutely right. It's just
We all go
a
through
natural
that.
reaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's so,
Yeah.
so important. And I think, you know, this is where, you know, people who have rising juniors, right? This is the thing to start thinking about, and even rising sophomores, because you don't know when that question's going to come up. I mean, I'm sure there are, you know, eighth graders out there who have already like started wanting to talk about college and stuff. You know, it goes both ways. So yeah, that's
I'm putting
amazing.
that phrase in the comments.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's really it, guys. As parents, you know, it is our time to start changing into consultant role.
Mhm.
And it's hard, because we've been there through everything. We've been through all the phases of telling them everything they should be doing, to questioning and asking them to, you know, justify and making choices and all that stuff. This is critical right now with the college planning time frame, that we need to start stepping back and just having that consultant role and answer questions when our kids have them, and guide them a little bit, but let them make decisions.
Absolutely. And I think also this is kind of interesting in that, like, once a student does come to you with, I want to do this or I want to do that, that means they have started down the path of figuring out career choices and majors and things like that. On their own, something occurred to them. Probably they heard someone else talking about it, or they thought about it.
Mhm.
This is the time when, yeah, you want them to investigate it. And this is what you do. They can work with you. That would be a great time to say, hey, okay, let's get you with Kristin and let's do the strengths thing. And let's say, okay, maybe that is where your strengths lie. But then you can help them officially like explore all the different career options and strengths and what different areas. So like once they're interested, that's when you do it, as opposed to like you telling them, okay, now it is time to do these things. Let it naturally happen. When the student starts expressing that interest, right, then you say, okay, now it's time to explore your strengths and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Bobby, the strengths piece of it, and for those of you that haven't heard us speak of this before, I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, and I do a assessment with the kids regarding their natural talents.
Mhm.
And the theory behind it is when you're using your natural talents, they actually energize you and they make you happy. So if you can do more of that in not only your personal life, but your career life, then you're going to have one of those jobs that it's not a job, that you're getting up because you love doing what you do every day. And you will not have that kid grow up and hit that age, golden age of like 45 to 50 and go, I hate my job. And why am I even doing this? Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it is important to tie their strengths in with their career, and it does help them start to adjust their thinking on the different types of careers because
Mhm.
now they've got some facts behind it. And I think that's a big piece of this too, Bobby,
Mhm.
is in college planning, it just feels like there's like the scatter shot, where they feel like they've got to do check the box, check the box. And if you can do what you said earlier and pick one
Mhm.
week, now all of a sudden you're making progress and
Yeah,
it feels like you're going towards a goal, you know? And I think
absolutely.
it's really helpful.
Absolutely. And I'm excited that we talked about this. And I think this leads into some more things that we'll get into in the coming weeks. So that's great.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Bobby.
Absolutely. Great to get to talk.